TheRaft by Jim LaMarche. There's nobody to play with, I complained. She doesn't even have a TV. Dad grinned. Well, she's not your normal kind of grandma, I guess, he said. Calls herself a river rat, he chuckled. But I promise she will have plenty of things for you to do. And you know I can't take you with me this summer, Nikki. There will be no kids there, and I'll be spending all my time at the plant. Felt tears starting again, but I blinked hard and looked out the window. That afternoon, I stood in Grandma's yard and watched my dad drive away. Dust rose up behind her car as it disappeared into the pines. Well, we can't stand here all summer, said Grandma. Come on, Nikki, it's time for supper. Honey or maple syrup on your cornbread, Grandma asked. I don't like cornbread, I mumbled, poking my finger into the syrup pitcher when she wasn't looking. If you're going to do that, you better wash up first, she said. She had eyes at the back of her head. Bathroom's through there. I pushed the doorway curtain aside and walked into what would have been the living room in anyone else's house. Books were scattered everywhere. On the tables, on the chairs, and even on the floor. 3 of the walls were cluttered with sketches, stuffed fishes, and charts of the river. Several fishing poles hung on from the 4th with a tackle box, a snorkel, and a mask on the floor beneath them. It looked like a river rat's workroom. All right, except in the middle of all that, of everything, was a half-finished carving of a bear. Been carving that old fellow for years, Grandma called from the kitchen. The real one hangs out by the dump. Now come get your supper before I feed it to him. Dad was right. Grandma found plenty of things for me to do. In the morning, I stacked firewood, then helped her clean out the rain gutters and change the spark plugs on her truck. The afternoon was almost over when she handed me a cane pole, a bobber, and some red worms. Fish fry tonight, she showed me how to bait the hook. The river is full of fat bluegills. Drop your line near the lily pads and you'll find them. Down at the dock, I looked things over. The lily pads were too close to shore. There couldn't have been any fish there. I walked it into the dock and threw my line out as far as I could. Then I sat down and waited. My bobber never moved. There's no fish in this stupid river, I said out loud and disgusted. We ate hamburgers for supper. I'll give it another try, said Grandma the next evening. I bet you'll catch something. Don't count on it, I thought as I headed out to the dock. I threw my line into the water and then I stretched out on the dock to wait. I must have fallen asleep, because I had wakened by a loud chirping and chattering. I sat up and looked around. A flock of birds was moving towards me along the river, hovering over something out floating on the river. It drifted downstream, closer and closer, until finally it bumped against the dock. Though it was covered with leaves and branches, now I could tell that was a raft. What was it doing floating all down the river all by itself? I wondered. I reached down and pushed some of the leaves aside. Beneath them was a drawing of a rabbit. It looked like those ancient cave paintings I've seen in books. Just outlines, but wild and fast and free. I cleaned away more of the leaves. It was like finding presents under the Christmas tree. A bear, a fox, a raccoon, all with the wild looks of a rabbit. Who had drawn them, I wondered? Where had the raft come from? I ran up to the cottage. Grandma was on the porch reading. Do you have some rope I can use? I asked. In the shed, hun, she said. Help yourself. She didn't ask what I needed it for, and I decided not to tell her yet. I pushed the raft into the reeds along the river's edge, then tied it to the dock so it wouldn't drift away. All the while, blues were over my head, every now and then swooping down to the raft as if it were a friend. A crane waded through the reeds to it. A turtle swam up from the river to the bottom of the river. The moon had risen a yellow over the river by the time I went to bed go to bed. I was already at the dock the next morning when Grandma appeared with a life jacket, a long pole. She didn't seem surprised by the raft at all, or by the animal paintings all over it. How did you know? I started. Let's go, Grandma interrupted, tossing me the life jacket and stepping onto the raft. She pushed the pole hard into the river bottom and we moved smoothly into the current. Your turn, she said after a few minutes. She showed me how to hold the pole and push, and I pulled us into the middle of the river. Even there, the water wasn't over my head. We pulled the raft up the river and then let it slowly drift back down. The birds kept us company the whole time, soaring, swooping, singing. Some even landed on the river and rode with us for a while. Hitchhikers, Grandma called them. After that, I had a little time for everything but the raft. I raced through whatever chores there were, and then I ran down to the dock, wondering what animals I would see that day. It wasn't just birds the raft attracted. One morning, 3 raccoons followed me along the shore. One other time, a turtle came onto board and spent the morning sunning itself. And one afternoon, I saw a family of foxes slip through the trees along the river. When the weather turned too hot and sticky to sleep indoors, Grandma helped me put up a small tent on the raft. I lay on top of the cool sheets and read comic books by a flashlight until I fell asleep. One night, a noise woke me up. There in the middle of the moonlight stood a huge buck. He looked right at me, then lowered his head to drink, as if I weren't there at all. Found Grandma the next morning working on a bird carving. "Do you have some extra paper I could draw on?" I asked her. She brought out a big sketch pad, a pouch filled with thick pencils and crayons. "I've been saving these just for you. Better take these too." She held out a snorkel and a mask. "Never know when they might come in handy on that raft." The sun was hot that afternoon, so I pulled into the shade of a willow. Then I waited to see what animals the raft would bring. It wasn't long before a great blue heron whooshed down with a crawfish in its bill. Grabbed a pencil and began to sketch. I felt invisible as the bird calmly ate its lunch right in front of me. Then it peered into its feathers, looked back out the river, and flew off. That night I showed my drawing to my grandma. "Not bad," she said. "Not bad at all." She tackled it onto the wall on top of one of her own sketches. One day I pulled up the river farther than I've ever been, near a clump of tall cattails. I startled an otter family that dove underwater, but as all the other animals, the raft seemed to calm them down. Soon they were playing all around me. Grandma was right about that mask and snorkel coming in handy. I slipped them on, then hung my head over the raft and watched the otters play, chasing fish, chasing each other, sometimes just chasing their own tails. I kept very still, but they didn't seem to mind me watching. They kept playing keep away with a small stone, then tug of war with a piece of rope. It was like they were showing off for me. They even let me feed them right out of my hand. Some mornings, Grandma would make a bag full of sandwiches and a thermos of icy lemonade. They would put on her bathing suits, grab some towels, a lawn chair, and an inner tube, and pull up the river to her favorite swimming spot. "I've come here swimming since I was a girl," she told us as we tied the raft to an old dock. "The Marshalls used to live here, all 10 of them. What a herd of wild animals we were." While Grandma watched from the inner tube, I practiced my flying cannonballs. Then we would eat our lunch, and she would tell me stories about growing up on the river. My favorite times when she found a small black pearl inside a river clam. "I still have it," she said. Somehow, on the river, it seemed like the summer would never end, but of course, it did. On my morning, I got up extra early and crept down to the dock. The air was cool and lowly pearly fog hung over the river. I untied the raft and quietly drifted downstream. Ahead of me, through the fog, I saw 2 deer moving across the river, a doe and her fawn. When they reached the shore, the doe leaped easily up the steep bank, then turned to wait for her baby. But the fawn was in trouble. It kept slipping down the muddy bank. The doe returned into water to help, but the more the fawn struggled, the deeper it got stuck. I pushed off the river bottom and drove the raft hard into the muddy bank, startling the doe. Then I dropped into the water. I was ankle deep in mud. "You're okay," I whispered to the fawn, praying the raft would calm it. I won't hurt you." Gradually, the fawn stopped struggling, as if it understood that I was there to help. I put my arms around it and pulled. It barely moved. I pulled again, then again, and slowly the fawn eased out of the mud, and finally it was free. Carefully, I carried the fawn up the bank to its mother. Then I quietly returned to the raft. From there, I watched the doe nuzzle and clean her baby, and I knew what I had to do. I pulled the stub of crayon from my pocket and drew the fawn in all its wildness onto the gray boards of the raft. When I had finished, I knew it was just right. After supper, I showed Grandma my drawing of the fawn and told her my story. "It's perfect," she said, "but we need to do one more thing." She hurried up to the cottage. When she came back, she had tubes of oil paint and 2 brushes. Grandma had helped me trace my drawing with oil paint, which soaked deep into the wood. "That will keep it, and I'll always be part of the river." "Just like you, Grandma," I told her. "A river rat." Grandma laughed. "Just like me," she agreed.